As you go down the rabbit hole of photography, you learn that there are a couple of different nuances that'll increase the effect of an image. Being able to take proper exposures is a very big thing within this world because you're essentially taking exposures of everything, and being able to nail it is going to really aid you in getting the best possible outcome. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 3 different meters that you're going to come across. I'll show you the results of all 3 types of meters, tell you what metering is, how to do it, and hopefully give you information to tell you which type of metering is suitable for you. Meters come in a few different shapes and forms, but it's important to understand the different types of metering. And the 2 main ones, and I think the only 2 ones, are reflective and incident metering. Reflective metering is essentially taking a reading of light that is bouncing off a subject. So for example, if I'm pointing my film camera at something and it's getting a reading through the viewfinder, that is reflective metering. Whatever the meter is pointed at, over here, over there, up there, down there, that's the scene that the meter is going to be taking into account and giving you your exposure reading for. The other type of metering is incident metering. In order to do some incident metering, you will need to pick up an incident meter. They're typically a separate piece of gear, just like this Sekonic that I've got here. It takes a reading of ambient light rather than a reflected light. Essentially, it'll meter for the entire scenario rather than just what the subject is reflecting. Film and digital cameras handle metering differently, but in today's video I'm going to show you how I did it with a film camera. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be testing out the 3 most common types of meters: your inbuilt meter, your hot shoe / cold shoe mount meter, as well as the incident meter. And I went out and literally field tested these things at a field. Let's go. All right, first shot, this is a really random sprinkler in a construction site. I'm gonna start with camera meter, and then I'll do external meter, and then I'll do Sekonic meter. I think that's the order I'll go. So keep that in mind while we continue through this video. So camera meter first. This should be easy. 1/1000 F22. I feel like that's very dark. F425. Cool. Sekonic, what have you got? 2.8. I definitely think the inbuilt meter for this camera is shot, but that's the whole point of doing this. Shot number 2. This is a much more stable scene than the other one. F4 at 1/1000th of a second. No. F5.6. Onboard meter says F56 is 1/1000th of a second. Kind of a boring image, but we're not really after the best images in the world for this video. Let's go Sekonic. This one wants F56 at 1/60th of a second. Cool. Don't know why they're all so crazy, but it's the same scene, so this is quite interesting. Here we go. 2/50th of a second, F56. Bang. Similar reading off of the dead tree. Reflx lab. Is that right? 125th of a second. Oh, my framing is awful in this comp, but that's alright. Alright, Sekonic. Take a reading. If we make it F56, it wants 1/30th of a second. That seems quite slow. It seems very slow.
This is a very beautiful scene. Let's see if we can get something cool. I love the grass here. All right, F4 1/500th of a second. Reflex lab actually turned on. F4 1/1000. Sekonic F430, 1/30th of a second. That varies quite a lot. And I think I trust the Sekonic on this one more.
So prior to shooting this video, it was actually my first time using an incident meter, and I learned a lot from doing this exercise. Both types of metering have merit in their own. There's definitely scenarios where you're going to want to use one or the other, and just like all things in photography, it's all a bit subjective. What you are shooting kind of depends on how you want to meter the scene, as well as whether you have time on your side. It's all kind of scenario based. And what I mean by that is reflective metering, it's going to be way more convenient. It's inbuilt to your camera. You are more used to shooting with it, and you are going to be more experienced with reflective metering. Of course, there are some cons to reflective metering. You can very easily trick a reflective meter in that if your subject is backlit, sometimes it'll like pick up on highlights and then your shadows will completely go, or maybe it'll pick up more on the shadows and then it'll just completely blow out your highlights. So there are nuances, and accuracy is a big thing to think about when you are doing reflective metering. The cold shoe mount meter that I was using, the Reflx Lab one, I looked up online and the angle of light that it takes in is 30 degrees. That is a big angle of light to be taking in. And when you are out shooting and you want to be sort of accurate, it's hard to know where the thing is pointing because it is taking in such a large angle of light. If I wanted to specifically meter for shadows using this, I'd probably have to get quite close to my subject and then move back for composition, and vice versa if I want to meter a little bit more for highlights. So that's something to consider with these little external meters. The same thing can ring true for the inbuilt meters. So those are the bigger cons and the bigger nuances with reflective metering. Incident metering, on the other hand, it's also really great, but you got to consider that you're taking another piece of gear alongside you. The fact that you are taking out another piece of gear, having to set it up, press the buttons and do all that sort of thing means that you're going to be slowing down your shooting process. So it's probably not good for fast-paced photography. Think street photography or wildlife photography, sports photography, that kind of thing. Especially things like dynamic lighting. So if you're taking pictures at like a music festival or somewhere really dark with flashing lights, incident metering is probably not going to be very handy because it's just going to completely blow out the stage, or whenever the light changes, it's going to be a bit inaccurate. So incident metering is probably going to be better for when you have more control over the situation and more time. Think of it like if you're playing COD and you're quick scoping, your reflective metering is going to be quick scoping. You're going to have some shots miss, but you're taking more. And then you've got your Sekonic or your incident meter, and you're doing old man sniping where you're being a lot more accurate, but you're hitting more shots. Think of it that way if you're a bit of a Call of Duty guy. Incident metering, of course there are cons, but the pros of it are that you're going to get a more accurate reading most of the time. Because you're taking in ambient light rather than reflected light, it's much harder to confuse this meter. And if you're plugging in the metered results into your camera, you're gonna get a nicely lit scene, as you could have seen in some of the sample images. The one that really stands out in my mind is the one with a lot of contrast. So this picture here, you can see on the reflected meter, it's kind of metered more for the sky rather than the foreground of the landscape and the guy playing soccer. You can see the power of the incident meter here. So to wrap up, I have learned a lot about these different types of metering styles and instruments used to take exposures. The fact that taking an exposure is the foundation of photography itself kind of gives you an idea of the weight of knowing this information. Knowing how to meter a scene properly, when to use a certain meter versus when not to use a certain meter is really gonna elevate yourself, and it has definitely given me more information on how to take better photos moving forward. I know now that using incident meters where I have more time, where I really want to nail my exposure the first time, maybe if I'm taking more medium format photos or high quality photos, I'll be able to use my incident meter to do that from now on. I also know that reflective metering has merit in its own. There's a time and a place for everything, and reflective metering is going to be probably the more used version of metering. The key takeaway for this is that what you are doing with your reflective meters inside of your camera is completely fine. Just know that if you are looking to find perfect exposures or more accurate exposures, because perfect doesn't exist, use an incident meter. It could be the thing that you're looking for. Guys, if you learned something new today, thank you for watching. Leave a like, comment down below if you use incident metering, and tell me your use cases for it. And I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe if you're new. See you there. Peace.